Hey guys, it's David. Welcome back to the VHS Revolution show and part 4 of my 100 favorite movies of the 21st century. When I first created this list, I didn't go crazy with the placement of every movie, especially leading into the top 20. I just kind of put them down and then adjusted here and there. But patterns showed up in each list that I didn't even recognize at first, like 3 Steven Soderbergh movies in part 3. And that's no different with this list. There's a lot of comic book movies and a lot of crime movies in this section of the list. I don't quite know why that is, but I'm happy with it. They're all amazing movies. So let's discuss them. Coming in at 40 is Avengers Endgame, directed by the Russos. So spoiler alert, there are 6 comic book movies on this list, and 4 of them are Marvel. In fact, the next 4 movies are Marvel, and I know we've been inundated with comic book movies over the last 15 plus years, and there are those that would say that Marvel has ruined cinema. But I think if you've been paying attention, some of these comic book movies are actually really, really great, and I'm not above putting comic book movies on my list. Some of them are among my favorite movie-going experiences of the 21st century, and some great stories that have been told. This is, to me, the last truly great Marvel movie, and the experience of seeing it in the movie theater was unlike anything else. And I'm not even what you would call a huge comic book fan, but the trick that Marvel pulled off over the 11 years of what they call the Infinity Saga was that they actually made me care about all these goofy characters. So seeing them all come together in dramatic fashion for the climactic battle was genuinely exciting and breathtaking. But beyond that, Avengers Endgame is filled with great dramatic scenes, payoffs to emotional arcs, and a genuine sense of life or death stakes as the Avengers who are left after Thanos' Infinity War snap work to reset time and destroy the Infinity Stones. The performances by Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Chris Hemsworth, Jeremy Renner, Mark Ruffalo, and the rest of the cast are all pitch perfect. And the Russos, who I think are the best directors of Marvel movies, keep tone and pace so consistent, the whole thing feels like a miracle. 39 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This was the first Marvel movie directed by the Russos, and it's like a shot in the arm for the series. Cap has always been my favorite character of the MCU, and his movies have been the most consistently great. While this second chapter is a major tonal shift from the Joe Johnston-directed first movie, it's really so cool. To me, it's one of the most intense, but also sexiest Marvel movies, if that's even possible, thanks in part to the chemistry between Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson, who's back as Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow. The Russos bring a new and welcome energy to the fight and action sequences, which are very well choreographed, shot, and edited, especially the Nick Fury ambush and the Cap and Winter Soldier fight in the streets. The third act does get a little CGI heavy, but it's forgivable because we're always tethered to these characters, the people among the stuff, not just the stuff itself. And to me, that's what Marvel at its best does so well, and The Winter Soldier is one of the best examples. At 38 is Avengers Infinity War, directed again by the Russos, and this is really my second favorite Marvel movie. It's an absolutely perfect blend of character, drama, and huge action, and builds to an unbelievable climax unlike any other I'd ever seen in a movie. And honestly, I don't think we'll ever see anything quite like Infinity War again. This, along with Endgame, was one of the great movie-going experiences of my lifetime. And if you're one of those snobs that thinks that a movie like this isn't cinema, then you don't know what great cinema is. It's a gift to everyone who invested their time and energy watching Marvel movies going back to the first Iron Man in 2008, and pays off so many great little bits and pieces. It also gives us our first peek into the life and psyche of one of our great movie villains, Thanos, played in an entirely motion-captured performance by Josh Brolin. Infinity War features almost every character we've come to love, and puts them together in new and amusing ways in scene after scene, and again builds to this unforgettable climax perfectly executed by the Russos. Avengers Endgame is truly a great movie that stands up with any other on this list. Which brings us to 37 and Captain America: Civil War, which dramatically speaking is my favorite Marvel movie. Sure, it may not have the huge scopy action of Infinity War or the iconic villain, but I think that actually works in the movie's favor. This is the only movie in the MCU that hinges on the war of ideals and values between the Avengers themselves, as Steve and Tony form different factions based on who agrees or disagrees with the newly announced Sokovia Accords. At this time in 2016, I found it so refreshing that the Avengers were battling each other instead of some other random villain hell-bent on taking over the world. The movie is also full of great scenes and real skillful character development mixed in with all the exciting and fun and well-choreographed action sequences. But central to it all is Captain America, aka Steve Rogers, and played by Chris Evans in what is my favorite Marvel character and performance. Civil War has been called Avengers 2.0, and while that's not totally incorrect, I still think of it as Steve's story, and it's my favorite Marvel movie. At 36 is Blackberry, co-written and directed by Matt Johnson, and truly one of the great discoveries of my last few years of watching movies. I had heard good things about this story of the rise and fall of the world's first smartphone, but when I watched it on a plane in 2023, I was unprepared for how funny it was. I had to stifle my laughter. I was laughing so hard and so much. Anchored by terrific performances from Glenn Howerton, Jay Baruchel, and director Matt Johnson, Blackberry is truly hilarious and one of my favorite movies. And if you haven't seen it, check it out right now. At 35 is Almost Famous, writer-director Cameron Crowe's semi-autobiographical love letter to 70s rock and roll. When it was released 25 years ago, despite almost uniformly positive reviews, Almost Famous was not a hit. It was nominated for a few Oscars and even won Crowe the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. But what's most important is that all these years later, the film has endured as an undisputed classic. It's about William Miller, a 15-year-old rock journalist on tour with the fictional band Stillwater to write an article for Rolling Stone magazine. It's one of the few movies about the 70s that to me feels completely authentic, from the hair to the costumes, the production design, and of course the music. The performances by Patrick Fugit, Billy Crudup, Kate Hudson, Frances McDormand, Jason Lee, Zooey Deschanel, and of course the great Philip Seymour Hoffman are all perfect. And the movie just makes me feel good every time I watch it. At 34 is Her, Spike Jonze's AI love story from 2013, which in 2025 feels more prescient and relevant than ever. Joaquin Phoenix gives one of his best and gentlest performances as Theodore, and the supporting cast led by Amy Adams, Rooney Mara, and of course the great Scarlett Johansson as the AI girlfriend are all perfect. Back in 2013, the idea of a man having an honest romantic relationship with an AI seemed like a cute sci-fi setup to dissect our ideas of love and romance and relationships. But now in 2025, isn't just a sci-fi idea, it's real. It's really happening. And it's hard to believe that Spike Jonze, who is one of our best and most unique filmmakers, and who also won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, hasn't made a film since. And that's a shame, because Jonze brings so much sensitivity to his movies, and it feels like the world could really use more films like that, especially now. Speaking of heart, 33 is Elf, director Jon Favreau's pre-Iron Man Christmas movie about Buddy, a human who is raised by elves in the North Pole and as an adult decides to venture out to New York City in search of his real father. Elf is basically a perfect movie, and it's easily one of star Will Ferrell's best performances. Every scene is bursting with joy and life, and director Jon Favreau employs a lot of practical effects and forced perspective shots, especially in the scenes in the North Pole, showing the height differences between Buddy and the other elves. Ferrell and his co-star Zooey Deschanel have genuine chemistry, and the romance between them is really sweet. And the casting of James Caan as Buddy's father proved to be spot on. When they were shooting, Caan apparently didn't get what Will Ferrell was doing and thought the whole thing was going to flop. But it didn't. It was a huge hit, and it's endured as a Christmas classic that my family and I watch every year. Number 32 is M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, another comic book movie of sorts, and one that absolutely blew me away when I saw it 25 years ago. Back in November of 2000, when the movie was released, there were a few comic book movies here and there, your X-Men's and Batman's and Blades. But what Shyamalan did was essentially create a completely original superhero origin story. Although we didn't know it until the final scene. And actually, I didn't even know it until I was in the parking lot with my friends afterwards talking about the movie and came to that realization and was even more amazed by what Shyamalan had pulled off. Unbreakable was the follow-up to his 1999 smash hit The Sixth Sense, and it maintains the same kind of tone of spooky uneasiness as David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis, discovers that he's really not as normal as he thought he was, and he develops this unusual friendship with Elijah Price, a comic book fan who thinks that the two of them have an unusual connection. He's played in one of his best performances by Samuel L. Jackson. Shyamalan followed up the movie years later with the sequels Split and Glass, and while those movies have their good qualities, for me, they really can't compare to the brilliance of Unbreakable. 31 is Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, an absolute blast of a movie. And yes, you could say that it's just another Scorsese crime movie like Goodfellas or Casino, The Irishman, or The Departed, but for me, it's really so much more than that. And let's face it, those other movies are great fucking movies. So it's not like Scorsese doesn't know his way around that kind of story. It's filled with great, funny performances from Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, and in her breakout role, Margot Robbie. The movie is almost wall-to-wall. Great, funny scenes, dialogue, editing, montages, music, performances. But for me, nothing beats the sequence of DiCaprio, high on drugs, trying to move his body and crawl just a few feet to get to his Lamborghini so he can get home. And the payoff as he sees his car the next day is a perfect punchline. At this point, we're pretty much used to every Scorsese movie being great in some way. But for me, The Wolf of Wall Street stands above almost all of them, and it's one of my personal favorites of the 21st century. As we move down the list to my top 30, so many of these movies feel like they kind of exist on the same horizontal line of my favorite movies, rather than some vertical list where one thing is better or worse than the other. And that's certainly true of my 30th favorite movie, Noah Baumbach's Frances Ha. The film stars his partner and frequent collaborator Greta Gerwig as Frances Halliday, a 20-something living in New York trying to figure out life, romance, and basically her place in the world. Baumbach shot the film in black and white, and it reminds me in the best way of Woody Allen's classic Manhattan, giving the film a timeless and almost wistful quality. Greta Gerwig is perfect as Frances. She's a very unique, flawed, at times very frustrating character, but that is also what gives the movie its hilariously funny edge. It's another movie that feels like it follows the rhythms and detours of life, rather than adhering to some kind of conventional film structure, and we're all the better for it. Frances Ha is a very special film. At 29 is Denis Villeneuve's somber and haunting sci-fi drama Arrival. The film stars Amy Adams as a linguist recruited by the United States Army to figure out how to communicate with alien beings whose UFOs are hovering over different cities around the world. She teams up with a physicist played by Jeremy Renner, and both actors give terrific performances. In fact, Amy Adams is so good that it's hard to imagine anyone else playing this role. And her performance is a huge part of why Arrival is such a great emotional experience. However, despite 6 acting nominations over the years, she was shockingly not nominated for this performance, and that's a shame. But a lot of the credit also goes to Villeneuve. Thanks to his great filmmaking and the screenplay by Eric Heiserer, what we realize at the end of Arrival is that this was never a story about aliens after all. It was always a story about our humanity. 28 is another alien movie of sorts, but in a completely different way. It's Harmony Korine's bonkers 2013 hit Spring Breakers. The film is about 4 girlfriends who head to Miami for spring break and get into all sorts of debauchery. They're played by Selena Gomez, Ashley Benson, Vanessa Hudgens, and Harmony's wife, Rachel Korine. And all these actresses are so good in these roles, it's almost a shame that they never got to do anything even remotely close to this again. Also amazing is James Franco as Alien, this drug dealer who brings them into his world of sex, drugs, money, and violence. Spring Breakers kind of starts as one thing, but then slowly morphs into another, and by the end, you're not even really sure if what you're watching is really happening, but that's actually what makes it so great. It casts this highly stylized, neon-soaked spell as it drifts from one memorable scene to another. It's a visceral experience that only Harmony Korine could have made, and it's an unhinged, visionary film. At 27 is another comic book adaptation. It's Edgar Wright's amazing Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Wright is a singular director unlike any other, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, based on the graphic novel series by Brian Lee O'Malley, is a movie unlike anything else. A brilliant, hilarious, warm blanket of a movie that mixes video games, comic books, rock and roll, teen romance, heroes and villains, all into one amazing concoction. And with an ensemble cast that includes Kieran Culkin, Chris Evans, Jason Schwartzman, Brie Larson, Anna Kendrick, Brandon Routh, and Aubrey Plaza, this movie absolutely cooks from beginning to end. But it would be nothing without Michael Cera as Scott and Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona Flowers, the object of his affection. Every scene, every line, including, "Didn't you get my email?" "Bread makes you fat," and "Tell it to the cleaning lady on Monday," still makes me laugh every time I watch it. I love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. 26 is the final comic book movie on this list, and it's arguably the best of them all. It's Christopher Nolan's 2008 blockbuster, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight has been called the heat of comic book movies, and it's a fair comparison as it resembles more of a Michael Mann-style urban crime thriller than what we used to think of as a traditional comic book movie. Nolan built on the strong foundation he created with 2005's Batman Begins to give us an even more grounded, visceral, and emotional experience with his second Batman movie. He unfortunately couldn't keep it up for the third movie, The Dark Knight Rises, which I think is a huge letdown. But Christian Bale is my second favorite Bruce Wayne Batman after Michael Keaton, and even though he's gotten some flack over the years for his gravelly, deep Batman voice, I always thought it was a great choice. Maggie Gyllenhaal, Aaron Eckhart, Gary Oldman, and Morgan Freeman are all terrific, and the score by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is one of my favorite scores of all time. But the biggest takeaway is, of course, the iconic Oscar-winning performance by Heath Ledger as Joker. He is amazing in this role, and every choice he made was absolutely perfect. Early in my trailer editing career, I got a job at a company, and my edit bay was right next to the editor who was cutting the Dark Knight trailer. So every day for months and months, I heard the dialogue and the music from the movie in trailer form, and it was glorious. The Dark Knight is way more than just a comic book movie. It's a great classic movie through and through. Speaking of Michael Mann, coming in at 25 is his classic 2004 thriller Collateral, starring Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. Cruise gives one of his best and most underrated performances as Vincent, a hitman who comes to LA to kill 5 people and forces cab driver Foxx to drive him around the city to complete his mission. Mann used digital cameras to shoot about 80% of the movie and has a look and feel unlike any other movie. Well, maybe it's like one other, but we'll get to that later. The movie also has wonderful supporting turns from Jada Pinkett Smith, Mark Ruffalo, Peter Berg, and Javier Bardem. But what really makes Collateral work so well is the performances and the chemistry between Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. Even though they're at odds throughout almost the entire movie, the script by Stuart Beattie gives us glimpses into a kind of partnership that develops between the two. And the movie could have just been a villain and victim story, but it's actually a lot more than that, and that's what makes it so cool. But for me, the best part of the movie is Tom Cruise, who is maybe the most unlike Tom Cruise he's ever been in a movie. He's completely believable as this stone-cold killer, but as the movie goes on, he gives us real traces of humanity to Vincent. Collateral is a great movie. At 24 is another Martin Scorsese masterpiece. It's The Departed from 2006. I'm just going to come out and say this right now, that this is not only one of my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio performances, I think it's one of his best, and it's the best collaboration between him and Scorsese. And for me, it's really the first time I saw Leo as an adult. He still felt too young in previous Scorsese films, Gangs of New York and The Aviator, but in The Departed, he feels just right. It's also a completely different character and performance than we had ever seen from him, and he absolutely nails it. So, of course, the Academy nominates him that year, not for The Departed, but for his absolutely mid performance in Blood Diamond. But they also nominated Scorsese, as they had done many times in the past, but this time he won. And I think it was well deserved. Not just for all of his great past work, but I think because The Departed is a genuinely great, brutal, invigorating movie, full of brash, movie star performances from Leo, Matt Damon in a rare antagonist role, Mark Wahlberg, Jack Nicholson, Alec Baldwin, Martin Sheen, and Vera Farmiga. And the script by William Monahan is a classic. The film is full of hilarious, vulgar dialogue and an urgent intensity that infects almost every scene. That intensity builds to a shocking, unforgettable climax that almost 20 years later, I'm still amazed they pulled off. I love The Departed. 23 is Hell or High Water from 2016. Directed by David Mackenzie and starring Ben Foster and Chris Pine, it's about 2 brothers who rob banks to make enough money to save their family ranch. Jeff Bridges and Gil Birmingham play the cops pursuing them. It's the second movie written by Taylor Sheridan, who went on to create the hit TV series Yellowstone, as well as about 200 other movies and TV shows. And what I love so much about Hell or High Water is that it is a movie that absolutely knows its time and place. These aren't any old characters in any old generic town in America. This is Texas, and every one of these characters feels completely authentic, right down to the lady serving steak at the diner. The same can also be said of the performances of Ben Foster and Chris Pine. And although Pine has been great in blockbusters like the Star Trek movies and Unstoppable, he's also really funny in Horrible Bosses 2. He's never been this tense or smoldering or explosive. Hell or High Water is the kind of movie where you might think you know how it's going to end, but you don't really know how it's going to get there. And what happens in the film is not only sad and inevitable, but also extremely satisfying. It's not as high profile as some of the other crime movies on this list, but it's one of the absolute best. When I was putting this list together originally, I just kind of put the movies in whatever order I thought that they felt right in. But I didn't realize just how many crime movies ended up in the same section. And I guess when a crime movie is done really well, it can be an energizing experience. And that is true of my 22nd pick, Ben Affleck's 2010 Boston bank robbery drama, The Town. I think, despite Argo winning Best Picture, The Town is really Ben Affleck's best movie, both as a director and as an actor. He gives his best, most nuanced performance as Doug McCrae, the leader of a group of childhood best friends who also rob banks in the Charlestown area of Boston. His closest friend is also the group's wild card, and he's played in an Oscar-nominated performance by Jeremy Renner. It's actually insane that Renner's nomination was the only one the film got, because I think it's right up there with other Boston set crime movies like The Departed and Mystic River that also were nominated for a bunch of Oscars and won. I think The Town is just as good as those movies. It features a wicked supporting cast that includes Rebecca Hall, John Hamm, Blake Lively, Pete Postlethwaite, thrillingly shot and edited action sequences including the car chase getaway and the finale set in and around Fenway Park. The Town, like Hell or High Water, has moments of great action and drama, but also explosive and at times disturbing violence. And at the center of it all is Affleck's Doug, who, try as he might to escape it all and have love in his life, finally finds some kind of peace in the end. But at what cost? And at 21 is Rian Johnson's directing debut, Brick. When I saw Brick in 2005, I knew immediately that Rian Johnson was an exciting new voice in movie making, and he's proved that time and time again in subsequent films like Looper, Star Wars The Last Jedi, and of course the Knives Out series. But for me, Brick is special, and there's nothing else like it. It's a puzzle box mystery with a gumshoe detective, a femme fatale, thugs, villains, dark corners, and explosive violence, but all set at a high school. Joseph Gordon-Levitt stars as Brendan, who discovers the body of a classmate and works to uncover the mystery of what happened and why. Rian Johnson has all the characters speak in a kind of hard-boiled detective movie style that's inspired by the novels of Dashiell Hammett, and it's almost Shakespearean in its almost impenetrable formality. I love listening to this movie. The dialogue is what makes it so entertaining. Johnson, as you know from the Knives Out movies, knows his way around a naughty mystery. And by setting the film at a high school with teenagers, it doesn't feel like a gimmick. It actually feels completely natural when you're watching it because, let's face it, teenagers have their own slang and way of speaking anyway. I love Brick. It's a fantastic movie, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Okay, that's it for part 4 of my 100 favorite movies of the 21st century. If you missed part 3, you can check it out here. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel. I have more great stuff coming up in 2026. And stay tuned very soon for part 5. Take care.